Hey guys, good to see all of you here. Let me ask you guys first off, how many of you have seen the AWP report? How many of you have actually watched it? I'd just like to get an indication. Good to see you, Sharon. I think I saw Stephanie a moment ago. Chris Davis, Zircon, SM Kovalinsky, thanks for your updates. Connie Lukens, good to see you. Pauline says, all I've seen is the AWP preview. I don't want to join to view it. It will be released September 2nd. Okay, so let's have a look. SM Kovalinsky, I know you've seen it. Janae Ann says no. Laugh at Live says I watched. Bria, have you seen it? Galsi says not yet. Janae, it's good to see you. Priya says, I've only seen the preview. Rotofib says yes. Greetings. Karen Davis says no. Peace from Denise says, it was awful. I cried the whole video. So I must say, the video that you saw, if you saw it, is really all about kind of seeing what happened and then kind of thinking, oh, that is what happened. And I must say, in some of the videos I put up, people said, how horrible, how dare you think about what happened, kind of thing. Well, that's what Adventures with Purpose do all the time. They try and intuit what happened, where it happened, document it, and they even took video of the vehicle underwater, and you can actually see just how clear it is. You even see some fish swimming around. And in the very last frame, when Nick comes up, he says he kind of can't say a word for a while. He actually seems traumatized, understandably, and to his credit. And then eventually says, that he's seen her, like not in a mic, but with his mask off. Simples Meerkat says, I will wait to see the full video. Brits Creek says, I've seen it. Janet Hill says, I saw it. Fonda as well. Now, the reason why I would like a lot of you who are here to have seen it is I'm going to tell their story in a totally different way. Although I'm going to review the episode, I'm going to tell it in a totally different way. And there's a method to, you might call it madness, there's a method to that. Those who haven't seen it will maybe not get what I'm trying to do. So I'm a narrator. I've written a lot of books, and there's a strategy to writing a book. You frame things in a certain way, you sketch things in a certain way, you introduce things in a certain way, and it's usually to tell or address or introduce a particular story, but also a particular idea surrounding that story, right? So I'm going to tell their story in a different way. I'm not going to take you through it chronologically. I'm going to take you through it in a different way. So in other words, if the story starts with A, B, C, D, I'm going to start with D, C, B, A, if that makes sense. And you're going to see why I do that later on as we get through it. Wild Irises, they were very respectful and professional. Jen H says, I've seen it, okay. Yeah, it does come out for everyone to view on September 2nd. You can watch it now if you're a member. I think you pay $6 or something. Terry Dean says, I saw it. Grimeter Paddy says, I saw it as well. Good evening, Miss V. Okay. Sharon says, I haven't seen it. Okay, so some of you have, some of you haven't. Timmy, I'm going to put you down so that I can get to my notes. So you may not be able to see my notes here, but I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3 pages of notes dealing with the latter half, and 1, 2, 3, and about 4 pages of notes dealing with the first half. So in a very basic way, we're going to start this analysis with the second half of it's about a 50-minute, just under 50-minute report or review of what their findings were, right? I would like to show you some of the footage, like photos of it, but out of respect to them, I'm sure they want people to sign up as members. I'm only really going to show 2 or 3 images. And they're also images you've probably seen before. This image here is from I think the early part of the search, the early stage of the search, and that is where they would actually get success in terms of the search. But it looks like there are kind of other members of the public. You don't quite see it in this frame, but there are other people, members of the public, that are sort of around. And in any event, this is from sort of the latter half of the documentary, where they start searching this particular area. Angel Mom says, I did see the video. Dallas says, I've seen it. Okay, so I'm going to really start this analysis from about the 26-minute mark of the almost 15-minute episode. In other words, just past halfway, right? And to me, this is the part that deals with Nick finding the vehicle, right? Nick, using the sonar, finds something, and it's the last 23 minutes or so that really deals with that aspect. The first 25 or 6 doesn't really. It's interesting, but doesn't really deal with it. Just a second. Yeah, so Nick Rinn, if you guys remember, he goes the one way and Doug Bishop goes the other way. Doug Bishop seems to be, in terms of reading the sonar or reading the scans, Doug seems to be more experienced. He seems to be the bigger expert of the two. He also described right in the beginning of the second section the idea to send Nick Rinn the other way. It seemed like it wasn't really a tactic as much as it was a training strategy, that it was a way for Nick to learn the equipment, because they want to set up a new or a second Adventures with Purpose. What do you call it? They want to set up a second program, or whatever you want to call it, a second team that would sort of work independently. So it wasn't necessarily a tactic to send Nick the other way. It was actually just for training, and that's sort of mentioned in the thing. And so what's really interesting is from 26 minutes on, whereas most of the episode is sort of focused on Doug, now Nick kind of assumes center stage. Nick is the dude with a sort of a bald head, and the guy who ultimately dived down, but he's also the guy who went the other way around the boat ramp. So let me see if I can show you. So they started there. Doug Bishop went that way, and you can sort of see him giving talking on camera from his boat while the search is going on, whereas Nick Rinn is going around here, and I think he's somewhere there, somewhere at this point. Can you guys see the cursor there? He's somewhere at this point where he comes across a member of the public that's standing there, and from his boat he says, Is this the normal level of the reservoir? And the guy says, this is the driest it's been in a long time. Then at 26:45, there's also a reference. I think this is where Doug talks as well. He says, this area here, there are a lot of cookouts and gatherings here. And that once again brings up the question, was a cookout or some kind of gathering along the shore part of the 300 party? Did a group of them break off and have a cookout? In my previous video, I spoke about how cold it was. It would actually make sense to make a fire, to keep warm. Then about 2 minutes later, at 28:17, you get the first view of what I call the isthmus. This isn't really an isthmus, it's a more peninsula, but the first time you get a view of this little peninsula in this episode is at almost half an hour into it. And I mean, that's what the part I was waiting for, is like, okay, so what did you see? How did you search for her, kind of thing? And so Nick Rinn very modestly sort of speaks into the camera saying, it's probably nothing, but it's a big shadow. So Nick sees something, and they're not quite sure what it is. And they start speculating, is it a boat or a SUV, right? And it's quite interesting how this, it's been sort of shown how adventures with purpose are much better than their search techniques is a lot better than law enforcement. I'm not saying it isn't, but it's quite interesting how they didn't arrive. They were absolutely certain. They didn't see something on their scan, and they were like absolutely certain, we found it. They found something that they thought could be a boat, and thought, well, it could also be a car. And then they thought they saw a wheel. And what's really interesting in the footage they've just put up is when you see the actual scan in real time, that sort of flamey black and yellow and orange, but you see it moving. There are moments where you feel like you can see, almost in like matrix code, the vehicle. The vehicle is on its roof, but it's not plumb on its roof. It feels like it's on its roof, but leaning slightly to one side. Bear in mind the submerged bank is at an angle as well, right? So you never really get a distant view of the vehicle all on its own. You always get sort of a partial view of the vehicle. But what is quite interesting is they then call Doug, and Doug kind of makes his way to where they are. That also, I think, delays the search to some extent. I mean, he's got to get from where he was to them in a boat, and he has a look, and then he wonders, he speculates, am I seeing a wheel? Does that look like a wheel? And it is really interesting with a much clearer imagery you see in the episode, how it does look like you see a wheel, and it does look like you see another wheel. But he's not completely sure. He sees a wheel, and then he still wonders, it could still be a boat. And you must remember what's going on now is he's comparing what he's seen in the past. Typically, they deal with very old car wrecks that are rusted, and the outer shell of the car is degraded and perforated often, it's rusted. And so their scans get a much stronger feel for these irregular surfaces that nevertheless stand out from the substrate than a new vehicle that is silver and shiny. And it kind of works a bit like stealth technology. A new vehicle with a sonar, it sort of slips off it. The scans don't quite get the same purchase that they would off a rusted vehicle, and one that's sort of dented and damaged by time, right? Deteriorated by time. And so because this vehicle because the scan is slipping off the surface layer, the there's this possibility that it could be a boat, because boats are designed to be slippery. They're designed to have smooth hulls. And so although they find this, they're not certain whether whether it's a boat or a vehicle. But of course, at this point, they're still above the water. What's also quite interesting, and I'm going back a little bit, is Doug Bishop, while he started his search going around this part of it, he was saying, it's very likely we're going to find Kiely here because we're close to the campground, right? And I think he made an error there. It's the same error I made. I assumed the party was at this campground when the party was actually somewhere here. So the likelihood was better that Kiely would be found, if she was in water, at that point or at that point. Does that make sense? Let me pull that up a bit higher, a bit bigger. So the party took place over here. Doug went around this side. He thought that likelihood was best that you'd find her there if she was in the water here. Nick went this way around. This is the part where he spoke to some members of the public who said the reservoir was unusually low. And then, but this is, I would say this is the second closest point from the party to a direct access to the water right here. That I would say is the closest. The party took place somewhere around here. Does that make sense? So do you remember before the episode came out, we saw these very grainy images of underwater? Well, what you see in this episode is much clearer. It's much clearer. That is also from the early footage. It's also much clearer than that. I'm just trying to see if I've got it here. Yeah, so that is footage that I've taken off my television. And I don't know if you can, I think that is a wheel. And I think that's another wheel. You don't see it as clearly when it's moving, but you kind of get a sense that you are seeing that could actually be the wheel there. That's the nose of the vehicle. That's the so that is the vehicle that you're seeing. But when you see it in motion, you feel like you're actually seeing, like with Neo's Matrix vision, if that makes sense. Okay, let's have a look at some of your comments. Yeah, she was new to the area. Janae says, I'm sure Nick will explain. Is that a road with a bridge that goes across the water to the left of the party? I'm not sure. Not actually sure. I would assume so. I would assume that there must be a bridge there. I don't know. I know there's a bridge somewhere here. I'm actually not sure, or it could be on this side. I know there is a road over a like a reservoir wall, but in terms of that, I'm not quite sure. But it's a good question. Green Eyes, hey, my first live on your channel. Okay, so just coming back to the early part of the analysis. So one of them says it's definitely something. Is it a boat or SUV? And then Doug says, I think I'm seeing a buildup, but there shouldn't be a buildup. In other words, he's saying the buildup refers to like not contagion, but algae or something that has grown on the side. And I think what happened there was he was perhaps mistaking, this was very early when they saw it, mistaking what looked like buildup for actually the scan slipping off the very new side of the vehicle. And so he was thinking, if there's buildup on this vehicle, it can't be Kylie's vehicle because this is a brand new vehicle or a very new incident. Sorry, it's not a brand new vehicle. I just mean it's a vehicle that has just gone in, right? I do think, although Adventures with Purpose have got expertise in this field, salvaging vehicles, I don't know. I just don't know. Maybe you guys can tell me. I don't know how many times they've found a vehicle in the middle of an active investigation. I'm talking about in the first week or two. Also, where they've found, yeah. So I've got an idea that if they've done it before, it's very unusual that they've found a vehicle this early since someone's gone missing. Has there been, so Kiely was the 24th missing person they've located. Those of you who are very familiar with AWP, have they found anyone else in as short a span of time? Yeah, Essen Kowalinsky says usually they've solved cold cases. Brits Creek says they usually do cold cases over 3 years old. So I'm just saying, in terms of that, this is quite a new scenario for them. And so this vehicle that was so newly crashed was definitely going to be a different signature, right? And that was why I think Doug wasn't sure in the beginning. He was like, am I seeing a boat or am I seeing a wheel? Am I seeing a boat, or is that not a boat and I'm seeing a wheel on the signature? So he said, is it a wheel? Is it a boat? Is it an upside down boat? And the way I saw it, it looked like it was upside down, but slightly to the side. You can imagine when a car's upside down, especially on a slope, it's not going to be exactly on its roof like when a car's on its wheels. When it's upside down, it may tilt more to one side than another. And then, without being able to see it, to Doug's credit, he said, I can tell that it's smooth. So the impression I got with them turning their phones off was they wanted to break the story. I got the feeling that they didn't want to communicate something and someone finds out and then some news agency breaks the story. I got the feeling they wanted to break the story. The other thing that I thought was interesting was he said when they were sort of, before they dived into the water, when they were sort of still thinking, could this be it? I think he said this is 3/10 of a mile from the campground. I don't know whether he meant the sanctuary, but I mean, obviously it was in the ballpark, is I think the point. And now we're going to deal with the sort of last 15 minutes. So at 34 minutes into this documentary, into this episode, the dive search starts. So it's a 49-minute episode with about 15 minutes to go. The dive search really commences, and Doug says to Nick, "Don't remove the license plate like we normally do. This is an active investigation." So that also kind of gives an idea that this is quite an unusual circumstance. The real-time search it's like a search in real time. It's a search that in a way competes with law enforcement search. And is just saying, we normally, when we find a vehicle, to prove that we found it, we take the license plate off because nothing else is really recognizable. In this case, don't do that. The authorities are going to want to see the vehicle as is, kind of thing. And then at 35 minutes, you see the first footage of a diver submerging. So that's 35 minutes into this episode, you see the first sort of underwater footage at Prosser Lake. What surprised me is that you see fish. you see small little fish swimming around the outside of the vehicle. I also noticed before it was said the driver's side window was intact. So I've heard a lot of people saying, no, it clearly wasn't intact, and maybe that's a mistake. So, for example, here you can see it looks like this window is broken, right? Here, the driver's side window. Let me just blow that up a little bit. It looks like this driver's side window is broken, right? And I've seen some people saying, I think he made a mistake, but he didn't. You could clearly see that it was intact. It's a little bit confusing because you've got to imagine now what you're seeing there is upside down. So when it's upside down, the driver's side window would be on that side, right? Does that make sense? If you turn that car upside down, the driver's side window is now on that side. And so when Nick came down to look inside the vehicle, you could see the torchlight, the flashlight, the diver's kit that he's using. You could see it reflecting in the window. So clearly the window is still there, right? Then he went from there slightly backwards. You couldn't really see much. When you looked into the driver's cockpit, you couldn't really see much. It just looked like you were looking into an empty vehicle. Then when he went back a little bit, you could see that window, let's call it the rear seat window, it looked like it was halfway open, not a quarter. I would have almost imagined it would be slightly open, like a quarter open. It was about half open. That footage is pretty clear, and I would love to share it with you, but I think, if you really want to see it, go and check it out yourself on Adventures with Purpose. And then he sort of goes further, and there's a little bit of the footage being, blurred out, which obviously shows he's finding something that is sensitive. I think it's at this point, as he's moving to the rear of the vehicle, he hasn't quite left that rear window, and he says he's found shoes. He's found a pair of shoes, right? And I assume those shoes were not on feet. They were just sort of floating. And then he goes to the rear and can't see anything there. And then it's when he's at the basically the point diagonally opposite the steering column that he seems to see human remains. So if you imagine that the steering column is the lowest point of the vehicle, then it's possible that where the human remains are at the highest point. So he said, I see a pair of shoes in the back. And that's not the very back. I think that was before he got right to the back, the sort of hatchback part. And then at about 37 minutes, he talks about human remains right up, and that is right up against the right side. And then it's at this point that he starts giving the details that we've already seen. You maybe should have seen. The passenger window has been broken out. I also thought that was quite interesting. He didn't simply say the passenger window is damaged or broken. He says been broken out. And then what I found a very poignant moment is that when Nick came up out the water, so he comes up out the water, he removes his mask, he's breathing quite deeply, and he sounds quite out of breath, but he looks traumatized. He's breathing, he doesn't say anything. And you can imagine a situation like that. You don't know what you're going to see, and then you do see something. And you can imagine it is traumatizing. And so I think at about 40 minutes, Nick said she's in the back of the vehicle. He finally spoke, and he said she's in the back of the vehicle. He said she's not in the driver's seat. And in a way, the way that that was said seemed to be saying this is foul play. Like I would expect her to be in the driver's seat, and because she wasn't, because she was totally somewhere else, this is to me a sign of foul play. Now, again, I've got to say, just personally, I totally disagree with that. And I could be totally wrong. You might say, well, you don't know anything about these sort of searches. But again, you've also got to bear in mind, Adventures with Purpose don't deal with, how can I put it, this level of fresh evidence. They normally deal with very old cases. So on the one hand, I would say this scenario is quite new to them, right? On the other hand, I would say surely they've encountered this sort of thing before, so he could be right. The way I would look at it is, faced with a scenario like this, where is it? Faced with a scenario like this, would you stay where you were? Would you've gone into the water, and the front part of your vehicle, bear in mind the slope that you're in, the front of your vehicle is in the deepest part of the water. So your engine, which then becomes the area where the steering wheel is and the dashboard, your feet are filling up with water, your hips are filling up with water. It's rising up to the level of your thighs and your stomach. Would you remain in that position, or would your first thought to be try to escape the water? Try and find somewhere where it's dry, because dryness means you can breathe. Dryness means you can escape. And then the next aspect is trying to punch out kick out the glass, right? So I don't know if I would try and solve the problem from the driver's seat if that's where the water is coming from. That's just my personal opinion. So I would actually think it's more likely that you would not have your seatbelt on, sitting under the confines of the steering wheel. I would imagine that you would try and get out of that position. Liesel, thanks a lot for that. So somebody sent me, or someone left a message saying it's impossible to kick out glass, right? And I want to just show you guys that it's not. And to me, it's quite strange because I live in South Africa and there's so many hijackings taking place all the time. And often it starts with someone breaking your driver's window, and that's how they gain access to the vehicle. So in South Africa, we see car vehicles being broken all the time. So this idea that, wow, it's impossible to break a driver's window, just to me is weird. Now I am going to get back to the rest of this episode and analysis, but I first want to just address this point. And I'm going to go to footage from the Rachel Ray show from former CIA officer Jason Hansen. And I'll put a link to that in the description. So have a look at this. See if I can move it. Whoa. So just watch how quickly this guy kicks out the glass. Now, I understand he's not a 16-year-old girl, but just watch how, in theory, how simple it is. And I don't think that is what happened with Kiely. I don't think she kicked it out on the first try, but it does seem like it was kicked out. It does seem like it was kicked out. Yeah, Green Eyes, it's 20 to 1 in the morning here. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the way that this documentary actually started, right? So throughout the documentary, throughout the report, AWP sort of oscillate between, is this an accident? Is it foul play? Is it foul play? Is it an accident? And that is really how it opens up. It opens up with a supporter of theirs who comes forward and says that he saw Kiely and another individual, and she was acting strange, and also he was acting strange, the other individual. And when this, I presume it was Kiely, when Kiely spoke to him, the guy that she was with was on the opposite side of the vehicle, and then when they moved, so there's this strange thing about how uncomfortable that encounter was and how suspicious it was. And that is how this episode opens up, with this sort of foul play setting, right? So let me go to that. So first of all, the opening of this episode is touching. There's sort of music. There's an emphasis on how high profile it is. I don't know AWP that well, but I would assume this must be one of their most high profile cases. I could be wrong, but I would assume that. The production value is also quite slick. The music, just the way that things are done, it's done quite a slick way. Then at 3:06, this guy called Nick comes into the story. So after a sort of intro, and he's introduced as a supporter of the channel, and he describes himself as an emergency roadside assistance guy. I'm not sure if he does it part-time or what the situation is. I'm not sure if he only does the Truckee area over weekends, or not quite sure about that. But he says that he was called out on an emergency roadside assist for battery, and he thought that the person that summoned him was Kiely, although apparently it wasn't Kiely who phoned. So although there was a request for roadside assistance, it didn't come off Kiely's number, and it was also not from the Prosser Lake. It was at Boca Lake or Boca Lake. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. And so then he describes Kiely, or the person he thought was Kiely, as hesitant, skeptical, anxious, and that she was wearing a gray top. Now, supposedly what she was wearing at the end was a white fleece or white hoodie with the words Odd Future on it in pink. Now, you'd imagine that he would remember the Odd Future part. Anyway, he remembered it as gray. So, gray is halfway between the black hoodie that was identified in the beginning and the white hoodie. So is this a positive identification? Now you assume it is, because Adventures with Purpose open with this footage. You'd assume this is supremely important. The male that she's with is described as wearing a black SF cap, a cap with that word SF on it, which I guess is for San Francisco. He's a thin guy. He's wearing a white bro tank, and he's got freckles or acne on his face. And this encounter took place right before or after 11 a.m., so in the middle of the day. And apparently this guy, Nick, recognized Kiely, or thought he recognized Kiely a week later when he saw a flyer, which, if you think about it, it's quite a long time to realize, wow, that's the person I saw, if you live in that area. He said that when he arrived at the scene, this young lady said to her phone had died, and so she used his phone. And then there's this really confusing dialogue about this young woman asking him how to put in a seatbelt. Not quite sure what to make of that. Then he kind of emphasizes that when he was speaking to her, she would be on one side of the vehicle and he would be on the other. And then when he was on the, and that she seemed uncomfortable, right? He talks about the awkwardness. He says, I thought she'd had a rough day and she seemed distressed. Now, as I say, this is how the narrator decided to open this episode. It spends maybe 10, 15 minutes talking about this witness and this encounter, and it is basically pushing a foul play type scenario. And I was thinking, well, why has it not been mentioned in the media? Like, why has it not made a headline that Kiely was actually last seen by this guy, right? Why because I mean, this guy's not a minor, so why is it not? Why do we not know about it? I mean, it's 3 weeks later. Why do we not know? The other thing I thought was strange is the location. It's not like this encounter happened near the campground or across a lake. It's sort of quite some way away. So the location's sort of not right. What she's wearing is not quite right. The timing, to me, is the worst part of it all. The timing's really vague. This guy can't seem to be sure if it happened on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. That's extremely vague timing. He seems to know it was at 11 o'clock in the morning, but he can't be sure what day it is. I do wonder whether this particular individual and what he said is the reason why Doug described the atmosphere around this as being leading possibly to something heavy. You kind of get I kind of get a sense that they either suspect it's a foul play type scenario, or that's the scenario they are leaning towards. I guess it means the same thing. But do you agree? It seems quite broad to say, when did you see this individual? I can't remember if it was Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And so on the map that AWP provide, they describe this as a potential sighting. So it's not even, it's a sighting, it's a potential sighting. And this then segues into them going to search the area around Boca Lake. And this deals with the first 10 minutes. So in a way, it kind of makes sense why they begin their search where they begin it, because I think they thought this individual who they've encountered, who's told them his story, he saw something that nobody else is aware of, and so that's where they started their search. But of course, that assumes all of that information is accurate. The other thing that I found a little bit funny, without it being not funny, but funny peculiar, was in the episode you see someone typing, "Was Kiely Rodni murdered?" into Google. And I think that's maybe a little bit unnecessary. I don't know. She could have run away. She could have gotten lost. She could have You know, I think murder is almost last on the list, but it's made first in the list in the first couple of minutes. And so one wonders, is one trying to be sensational? So let's just have a look at what you guys have said here in terms of this poll. Foul play 71%. So I'm definitely talking to I don't want to say an unfriendly audience, but definitely an audience that most of you think it was foul play. Let me ask you guys a question now and see if you can leave the answer now as well. Do you want it to be foul play? So if you could choose, do you want it to be foul play or do you want it to be an accident? I'm talking about if you could wave a magic wand, do you want it to be foul play or do you want it to be an accident? Which one would you prefer? Sharon says no, Liz says no. Tiffany says, I don't care, okay. Some of you say accident. Sleuth and Sandal says there's an element of sensational, but the case kind of is. Yeah, that's true. Prayer Partner says, I was thinking accident until I saw the video. Brits Creek says, I got a sensational vibe as well. So I think it's a very ugly question, actually, to say, do you want it to be a murder or do you want it to be an accident? The right approach is to say, what does the evidence show, isn't it? Shouldn't you say, I don't, it's not really about what I want, it's about this is what I think it shows, right? I do think if you're a creator, so you can ask you guys, the true crime community, what do you think it is? And then you could also say, what do you want it to be? But I think if you had to ask a creator, what do you want? I think they would, if they were being honest, they would say, I want it to be murder. I want it to be this salacious, maybe there's an abduction and maybe all sorts of other things going on, SA or whatever, because that's going to be this incredible story. There's far more meat and potatoes to that story. And that's disgusting because that's not true crime. That is, I want this to be whatever so that my channel can do well. I'm here to find out what happened. And I'm sort of, my bias is towards reality. And does that make sense? So to say I want it to be this, it's really, although it's I think a true question, because I think some people do want it one way or the other. I think you've got to also ask, well, are you being fair to the actual circumstances here? And I know that this isn't a very popular debate that I'm having here to say that or that. I know the popular debate is that it's foul play, but is it realistic? Yeah, true crime searches for truth. Well, it should. It should. Yeah, no, I think there needs to be another category of true crime. I think you need another category, which is sensational crime or conspiracy crime. And I see about 20 people have stopped watching now. Tabloid crime. I think there's true crime that is true, and then I think there's other crime that is, let's make this darker and more shadowy and more exciting kind of thing. Well, that's not true crime. Terry says, I was really surprised that AWP implied anything but an accident, in my opinion. Paddy says, truth is what matters. of course, where we are right now, we don't know what the ultimate outcome is. But you're also not getting like reports in Truckee, beware, there's somebody out there. It feels like this is being investigated by the traffic authorities, not by, it was handed from the sheriff to the traffic department, not to anybody else. I think they are still trying to find out exactly what happened. Okay, so anyway, let me continue. So in the episode, it's around about at 13:39, Doug says, I hope it's an accident. And there's quite a lot of debate in the middle of the episode. Is it accident or is it foul play? But as I say, to me, they frame the narrative with a foul play scenario. There's this odd guy with acne who's behaving strangely, and there's a woman who's distressed, and this, that, and the next thing. It opens with a foul play frame, right? And I've got to say, I don't think it behoves true crime to be emotional about it, even though there are emotional aspects to it. I think if you're being honest, the more emotional folks here want it to be foul play, or you could maybe say the people who are more emotional think it's foul play. Is that a fair statement? And those who are less emotional and maybe more evidence-based are inclined to think it's an accident. Is that a fair statement? So anyway, going further into the episode, they go to Donna Lake. I must say, some of the scenes from the drone are really beautiful. Like, I've seen Google Earth footage, Google Earth animation or whatever it is of the area, but it doesn't do justice to the actual area. It really is quite stunning. And you see them going through all 3 boat ramps at Donna Lake. Now, I've heard it sort of said over and over again that Adventures with Purpose found Kiely's vehicle in 35 minutes, but they spent a whole day before that searching somewhere else. So I don't know when you start the search. Do you compare AWP search like the day they start searching, or do you start the clock from the moment they start searching at Prosser Lake? I don't know. I think if you're going to compare the law enforcement search, you would say, well, they started searching on that day. Well, don't you do that the same with AWP? Well, if that's the case, then it took AWP a day and a half. That's just the way I see it. The part that I found a little bit bizarre watching the documentary was in the middle of their search, they're talking about, could she have been murdered? Could there be foul play? And you just see people all around them. You see sort of boats around them. You see cars all around them. In other words, the fabric of society is all around them. And so, like, there's this idea of, in terms of Donna Lake, certainly, did somebody commit a murder, like in the middle of this public space where there are so many people? And I can tell you, I went to a beach area where I was told someone was murdered, and I personally thought it was very unlikely, like to murder someone on a beach. There's line of sight in all these different directions. Where you have a lake situation, you have the same thing. There's line of sight going for, you could see from the other side of a lake as well. And so obviously at night it's a little bit different. But I remember going there and asking, where did this murder take place? And then I found an area that was really secluded where there was no line of sight. but it's very unlikely in open air settings like that, where you've got line of sight going on basically for miles, where someone can see for miles away that someone's going to commit a crime. Just in terms of that, it's very, very unlikely. Where someone's going to push a vehicle in, but you can see it, you can see if something's happening like that from miles away. Does that make sense? Jennifer Comstock says, I'm running behind about 30 minutes. You asked if AWP ever solved fresher cases. Earlier this summer in my area, they solved a missing person case where the person was missing only 1 year. Yeah, so only 1 year, but this is 2 weeks. So this is definitely different. So there's a whole section of the video that's devoted to day one of the search, where they searched very shallow ponds, where they searched Boca Lake, I think, and then where they searched Donna Lake, which is quite close to, it's closer to, relatively closer to Kiely's home, the Lost Trail Lodge. Then it deals with, at 20 minutes 40 seconds, it deals with day two. And this part I'm not really 100% sure about. Doug says it's 10:41. He talks about it's 10:41 and we're now going, and it looks like they sort of enter the water at the boat ramp, right, at 10:41. And he says this is Kiely's last known location. I think he means that in a broad way. I don't think he meant where the ping is. I think he was just saying at this lake is generally the last known location. But he describes the search at Prosser Lake starting at 10:41. I mean, he mentions that time. Now, I think it's SF Investigates. An investigator said that the parents were alerted, or the father and grandfather were alerted at 2:48 p.m. So I don't know how that jibes with the timeline. I don't know. Do you start the clock at 10:41? Did they only positively? I don't quite understand how those two jibe. Is it the search start from the isthmus? Is that the one that took 35 minutes? I'm just not quite sure how or is it? It took 35 minutes from 10:41 to locate on sonar. So what was the discovery actually made it at about 11, right? I'm just saying, if you play out these calculations, was the discovery made at about 11 a.m. and then you can see when the vehicle is pulled out, the sun's setting. It's at the end of the day. So I'm just wondering from what point the 35-minute calculation is made. That's all. Then the other thing I thought was interesting, I sort of picked this up, was that Doug spoke about social media, that Facebook was on fire while he was sort of on the reservoir. So while he was sort of paddling around, he said, Facebook's on fire right now, and it was on fire with a foul play scenario. People were talking about drinking and drugging and the possibility of someone at this party doing something to Kiely. So it was within that context of social media that they were searching. What did he say? He said, so I can... Oh, he said, someone knows something. Someone possibly did something, right? And I'm just saying that again pushes the foul play narrative, but where's it coming from? It's coming from social media. Is that a good source for that? Is that a good source for that? Tiffany says 35 minutes of them being in that lake and they found it. So, Tiffany, all I'm saying is at 10:41, you see him pushing off into the lake, and he says it's 10:41. So 35 minutes after that would be just past 11 a.m. So if it is 11 a.m., so from 11 a.m. to 2:48 is about 4 hours. It'll take 4 hours to alert her family. Just seems a bit like, if you've confirmed that it's what it is, 4 hours seems to be quite a long time to confirm to the family. I don't know. Holly Go Lightly says, sorry I'm late, but I'll catch the replay later. Honora says, you're going to lose lose what? So obviously, if my perspective here was I want to grow my channel, then I obviously want to ingratiate myself with a channel with millions of subscribers. You know, I want to be as nice as possible as I can be to them, so they come onto my channel and I interview them and I can get the rubble for that, right? But I'm not doing that. I'm just simply reporting on this the way that I see it, right? And I want you guys just to recognize that YouTube is a business, and there's a business to what people are saying. I don't know whether it's necessarily true. Do you guys see that? So, I mean, you've got to think about it. Do I want AWP to like me? So do I want to be likable? Am I going to also push the foul play narrative so they come onto my channel? Or I'm going to tell it as I see it? Am I going to tell it as 71% of you guys see it? How many is it now? 71%, 70%. A heck of a lot of you think it is foul play. It may turn out to be foul play. We'll see. What I'm going to share with you guys now is a wiki on how to escape from a sinking car. And that comes from over there. I'll put a link to this in chat. I'm also going to put a link to how to kick out the glass in a vehicle. Put a link to that as well. And it just says here, being trapped inside a sinking car is absolutely terrifying. You can imagine that. The difference between this narrative right here and what happened to Kiely, like when you look at these images like that and that, but in particular that's, you can see like there's sunshine on that person. What Kiely experienced was at night, right? What Kiely experienced was at night, and I think that is much, much more difficult. What does someone say? You can't kick out the glass in most modern cars. Well, what they show here, Brittany, is you can also use that part. So if you, in a modern car, I don't know how long it will take to remove this, but you can try and remove your headrest and use this to break the window. That's another thing you can do. I would also recommend, if it's during the day, that you might want to use your phone, because your phone is quite hard as well, and the side of it may break the glass as well. Christopher says there needs to be a third option, which is we don't know. It's a valid point. I do think with so much information that's out there, I think you've got to start leaning one way or the other. You know, it's almost like a court case where you say, okay, we'll have a hung jury and that's fine. I think we've got enough information to lean one way or the other. I'm not saying by any means that we know everything and that it's absolutely certain, but I do think it's quite clear. To say there's no proof of alcohol or drugs, what would you say if the toxicology doesn't show alcohol or drugs? So if they don't come up, does that mean there wasn't alcohol? I don't know what the situation is with water and if there was alcohol to begin with. I'm not sure. Anyway, if we go back to this, the steps are that you must try and remain calm and act quickly. And so you can imagine that that is exactly what Kiely did, that she did act quickly. We don't know if she would have remained calm. I don't know who would remain calm. But you should try not to panic and try and stay focused. Your priority is to escape. And I think that was her priority. You must bear in mind there is a window of time where you can do a certain amount, and you didn't hit the water so hard that you would be stunned. So it's like you're in a situation. What are you going to do with this situation? Stargirl says, I heard you've got to wait 7 seconds before trying to get out. Yeah, well, I think you've got to wait for the vehicle to sort of stabilize. Then it's kind of common sense, but undo your seatbelt. That's one of the first things to do. And then try and open the window, right? Don't try and open the door, open the window. And what you can see here is the vehicle is still above water, and you try and open the window that's right by you. Now, of course, if it's an electric vehicle, would you be able to do that? It says, don't try to escape through a door. The pressure of the water will make it nearly impossible to open within a few seconds of impact. So in other words, don't first try and open the door, first open the window. Once the vehicle is completely submerged, right? Bear in mind when there's an air pocket on your side, trying to push the door open with the window closed is going to be quite difficult. But once the entire vehicle is submerged, that's when opening the door is going to be easier. Break a window if you can't open one. So the priority is get the window open. I think another thing you could try and do to break a window is use that part of the seat belt. That metal part, you could use that as well to make the initial break in the glass. Get any children out first. Escape through the opened or broken window, right? Don't try and go through so this is actually showing someone escaping while the vehicle is now submerged already. But you can almost imagine here it's just submerged and that you can see where the light is in the water. Kiely wouldn't have had that benefit. It says, try to open a door if the car is submerged. So only once the car is submerged, try opening the door. That may be something that Kiely would have needed to know. Of course, it's easier said than done. If the inside of the vehicle is filled with water, you also don't know which door is going to open. You don't know which way is up or down. It says it takes 1 to 2 minutes for a car to fill up with water. Unfortunately, your chances of escaping are very low unless you have an oxygen supply. If exiting via an open door, place your hand on the door latch. So if Kiely couldn't open doors and she couldn't break a window, her next best option would have been to push the door. The door wouldn't necessarily, I don't know whether it would lock electronically. I suppose it could. And then swim to the surface as quickly as possible. Call emergency services once you're out. Yeah, so all of that is definitely easier said than done. Definitely easier said than done. Bria says, how long does it take for the car to fill with water? It looks like 1 to 2 minutes, but bear in mind a vehicle does have air in its tires, so the tires are going to provide a kind of flotation. Yes, the car does turn upside down. Let's have a look again at the poll. 71% saying foul play. Okay. Emily says maybe a third option. I don't know. Sarah says, I just joined. Did anyone talk about the roadside assistance? Yeah, there was a guy called Nick who is a supporter of the AWP channel. He said that he was called out by someone who he thought was Kiely. I don't remember him saying that he recognized the Honda. But anyway, he thought it was Kiely, and it was on a battery issue. And the person that he saw seemed distressed and was asking questions about a safety belt, and was with a individual described as having acne and acne or freckles. And there seemed some kind of awkwardness between this female and the male. This was said to have occurred near Boca Lake at 11 a.m., but he can't be sure if it was Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So that's that. Does anyone know if Kiely was a strong swimmer or good in the water? It's an interesting question. Okay, I think that is going to be it from my side. I'm going to keep it fairly short. AWP documentaries are amazing. They are angels among us. The tow truck guy's girlfriend said Saturday she remembers it was her dad's birthday. The tow truck guy's girlfriend. Okay. Paddy says nothing wrong and everything right about maintaining objectivity when we do know that we do not know all that law enforcement knows. So I'm going to end off just by saying I feel like I got a little epiphany. I know like a lot of you are new to the channel won't care about this, I think. But those who know me very well, I think will appreciate this. I feel like I got an epiphany with the Artemis launch, which had to do with actual rocket science. And it kind of just made me think the wisdom with actual rocket science and actual rockets is to be very cautious and to wait. And I'm talking about launching rockets kind of thing. And my channel's objective for a long time has been to be the first to bring out content. And I think I'm going to change that to be more cautious about bringing content out. I don't mean if I feel like the answer is clear, then I will communicate that. I don't mean wait till the toxicology comes out. I just mean instead of racing to be the first to bring something out, I think I would rather, like rocket scientists in the real world, err on the side of caution, like you've just seen with the Artemis launch, which has been delayed from Monday to Saturday. I just feel like that's quite an interesting lesson for me and for this channel. My first response when the AWP thing came out was to just finish the research that I was busy with, which was dealing with, funny enough, the windows being open or closed. And I think some of the biggest evidence that came out of this AWP report was the windows, the confirmation that the driver's window was up, the confirmation that the rear window directly behind it was halfway down, and the confirmation that the passenger window was smashed out. To me, that's by far the biggest evidence that came out of all of this. And yeah, just it feels gratifying. It feels good that that was the line of inquiry I was taking before it came on, where I was just thinking about, would the window have been up given how cold it was there? 57 degrees. The part that messes up that whole calculus is, why was the window in the seat behind her, why was that down? That sort of messes up all of that reasoning. Bria says, so no one is ever driving near water with the windows down ever again then? Bria, you should actually drive, if that's what you're thinking, you should drive with your windows down, because then you don't have to get them down to get out. Does that make sense? Why be so nosy? Says yes, upside down, and that would add to disorientation. Sammy claimed she loved water. Carla says this case is so sad. Yeah, I must say again, I was touched by when Nick came out the water. You could just see trauma written all over his face. You could just see that he was shaken. You could definitely see that he was shaken. He couldn't speak for quite a long time, and he seemed really out of breath. Yeah, that was, for me, that was a really powerful moment. Deborah says, how is your knee? It's strapped up. I'm on anti-inflammatories. It's quite bad. I'm limping as I walk. I didn't take my dog for a walk, so yeah, thanks for the question. Okay, I want to wrap this up. Zircon says, thanks, Nick, food for thought. CMM says, I just don't understand how you can say that there's enough evidence to say this was an accident. First of all, we are missing all the key evidence. Okay, I just don't understand how there's enough evidence to say this was an accident. So it happened late at night. It's a young driver. You can say either that she wasn't intoxicated or there's no proof that she was, but what tends to happen on Friday nights when young people get together? So if you say, you know what, I need proof that she was intoxicated, I feel like that's kind of a common sense thing. And you might say, yes, but that's speculation. It is speculation, but it's reasonable. What do young kids that are seniors having a party together do? What did you do? So young driver at night, given the terrain, given where the vehicle was found, given a scenario of being intoxicated, given where the last ping was, it seems more likely. And then if you look at the just the stats for how most teenagers die, it's 50% accidents, 13% homicide. So the stats overwhelmingly show that. And like I've said, people seem to want to believe in the irrational because everyone wants to believe it, so you believe it as well. The science doesn't support that. The statistics don't support that. It's far more popular to say it's foul play and it's definitely this or that, but it's not logical. So that's the answer to that. Thanks, Laurie, and thank you to Les. Thanks a lot. Wouldn't the company have service logs of exactly when that Nick was working on Kiely's car? Yeah. Also, there's supposed to be dash cam of that. So you would imagine you know, like we've seen the last photo of Kiely from CCTV. Why wouldn't that have been given to the authorities to say this is actually the last footage? Why didn't the authorities, why has that not been taken up by the authorities to say this was an important encounter, can you tell us more about it, and put that out into the public? Is there always water in the area? I've seen pictures where it was a lot lower. Yeah, well, that definitely does fluctuate. Casey says, Nick, you'd make a good judge. I'd like to think so. Linda says they also mentioned that there was an argument. Nick said they have forward-facing cameras in the work trucks. It's all on video. Okay, so where's the video? Why hasn't law enforcement released that as the last footage of Kiely? Yeah, slow and steady wins the race. Someone said, I heard she was a good swimmer. David Bebb says, why is the window down in the photo? Okay, so let's go to that. So if we go to that, I don't think the window's down, but I mean, if you're saying why is the window not there, because probably they broke it when they what's the word? Turned the vehicle over, and in the process of, bear in mind the vehicle's full of water now, the vehicle's being towed out, and a tremendous force is being exerted on the vehicle. So where there's vehicle, for example, yeah, you can actually see. Can you see that? Yeah, you can actually see that window's only, it's even more than halfway open, right? So you can imagine when this vehicle is being, let's just do that. When this vehicle is being pulled that way, right? Water is going to be going in here and it's going to be building up in here. That could be one way that that window breaks, right? But like I said earlier, in the footage, you can see Nick Wren going down, and he looks into the driver's side, and you can see a reflection in the window of his flashlight. That shows and that proves that when the car was upside down, how it was found, that driver's window was intact. Does that make sense? David says, I'd been assuming the window shattered on impact. I don't think it shattered on impact. Does AWP say they broke it? I don't think they said they broke it, but I think they did, or it did, during the salvage process. Show Nick some love. Was the rear window down far enough for a person to fit through? Well, if you look at this, Terry, if you look at that distance, it's maybe just enough for certainly for Kiely to have gotten through. I think that's enough room. Is quite an interesting question. So thanks a lot, Yvonne. So I'm going to bring something up that's, I'd rather not bring it up, but I feel like I have to. Just because, how can I say this? So intertextually, this case, I think, is kind of similar to Lacey Peterson, right? You know what happened there? She was buried at sea in San Francisco Bay. 3 months later, her torso basically washed ashore in San Francisco Bay. A mile further down, her unborn child, Connor, who was still a fetus, almost full term, also washed ashore, right? So I've written 3 books about the Lacey Peterson case. You've got to think about, so if you think that, you know, in my mind, Kiely should have been sitting behind the wheel. She should have been found sitting behind the wheel, and that would show it's an accident, right? The fact that she's not behind the wheel and she's not even in one seat behind, but she's right at the back, that's proof that it's a foul play. Again, I'd rather not say this because it's just kind of a horrible thought, but you've got to imagine what happens to human remains 2 weeks in water, right? You've got to imagine that after 2 weeks, human remains in water change. The chemicals change, gases change. And literally what does happen is a person to some extent bloats and to some extent floats. And so a, a, um, a cadaver that is floating is going to float to the top of a sealed container, and that's exactly where Kiely was found. I'm sorry if it's unpleasant to think about, but that's what cadavers do. And I think people just either don't know about that, or I don't know whether they're not thinking about that. It's an unpleasant thought, but it's nevertheless the normal process of decomposition. Yeah, Deborah says it's not very nice to see a body in that state. I wouldn't be surprised if that is why Nick was so traumatized, because it couldn't have it's that sort of thing I think will burn itself into your memory for your entire life. Um, you know. Someone says maybe a Navy SEAL possibly could get out. I don't think you've got to be an expert. I just think you need to act decisively. But I do think in a situation at night, everything gets much, much more difficult. I think it's very hard not to panic. I think at night it's going to be very hard. And I think if you are even a little bit intoxicated, let's say you've had 1 glass of wine, I think it's going to make it a lot harder to act the right way, to act with precision. I just think it's going to be very, very difficult. If you think about the vehicle goes in and you've got basically 60 seconds to make the right decisions, it's hard to imagine that you would definitely make the right decisions, you know, in the dark. It's hard to imagine that. So again, that is the footage of, is there another one? I think there, isn't there another one? Anyway, that's the footage of the vehicle. In their documentary, this footage is really done well. You feel like you're seeing it. It's hard to tell whether you are seeing it or whether you're imagining it, but you get a kind of a matrix-like view. Connie says, I'm catching up, but perhaps it was a foul accident, like an overdose death, then cover up. Yeah, I mean, often when people are caught 50-50 between two extremes, was it foul play, was an accident? It could be a combination. It could be that she was not naturally intoxicated. You know, in other words, someone spiked her drink, for example. And I would submit that probably the boys at the party were trying to get her drunk, maybe so that they could get laid. And so she was a lot drunker than she would normally be. Um, if you call that foul play, well, then it's foul play. But it's, you know, at the end of the day, how did Kiely end up driving into the reservoir? Well, because she got behind the wheel, because she took a wrong turn, because she didn't realize where she was. That's the way I see it. The passenger side window is blown out. That can make sense. When you sit in the driver's seat, you turn to the right and try to, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly it. So to me, it does look like Kiely fought for her life. It does look like the fact that the passenger window being broken, that she partially succeeded in escaping. I don't know whether the vehicle turning over would have complicated the escape, but I would imagine it would. I would imagine you wouldn't know where you are, and also panic would get worse. And bear in mind, a lot of this is in the dark. That would definitely make it a lot harder. Brittany says the space between the headrest in the back seat and the trunk is about 7 foot. Ricardo says, wouldn't fish school around the car? I did see 2 little fish swimming around the driver's side window. Pauline says, my thoughts go to Detective Bormover. Yeah, I mean, that's another case of bodies in liquid, right? Amy says, thanks, Amy. I think we're going to wrap up here. Amy says, you have a very awesome channel. Keep doing what you're doing and sharing facts. People can come on here and be jerks, but know that you're genuine. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not trying to win a popularity contest. It's not like I don't care about being popular, but I care more about being fact-based and anchored in evidence. So anyway, where we are now with the poll, 72% say foul play. Are most of you right, or are the minority here more on track? Time will certainly tell, I think. Okay, so I'm not going to take it further than that. Guys, thanks a lot for listening. Take care. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks to the mods and the new subscribers. And I'll see you guys next time.